Just a quick disclaimer, I'm only going to be ranking the first 3 Evil Dead movies today, i.e. the ones with Ash in them, because as far as I'm concerned, if an Evil Dead movie doesn't have Ash in it, it's not a proper Evil Dead movie. Let me give you an example. Proper Evil Dead movies. This one, just silly, unrealistic, woke nonsense. So, I'm just kidding. We're going to be doing all 5, and actually, that one I've just thrown away there could do quite well. Hi guys, a quick word of warning. There may be spoilers today for the various movies, including with the very recently released 5th one. I was quite late to Evil Dead. I'm 42 right now. I've been watching horror films my entire life, but I don't think I watched any of these until I was roughly 33, maybe. In fact, I think I just missed out on the release of the 2013 film from memory. But as soon as I'd watched one, I knew I had to go on and watch all of them, and I just can't believe it took me that long to get into these. Though in my defence, they never used to show these films on TV when I was growing up. I can't quite call myself a true Deadite though, because I've never watched Ash vs Evil Dead. It's one of those things that I keep meaning to get around to, but I just don't. Maybe one day. But this video is all about the movies, so let's dive into it, and I guess we will start with the film that I consider to be the weakest in the series, but it's still alright. There's no poor Evil Dead films, in my opinion. So here's what I've got at number 5. So at number 5, we've got Army of Darkness, probably the most comedic of all the films, and in a nutshell, that's why it's bottom. I'm not the biggest lover of horror comedies in general. The only good one that I can think of is probably Tremors. But this film, even though it is semi-humorous in parts, it's never done an awful lot for me. I think the other comedic film in this franchise, Evil Dead 2, it gets away with it a lot more than Army of Darkness, because with Evil Dead 2, it's sort of a copy of the first film, but with a slightly different tone. But because we've already had a proper horror film with the original film in terms of a cabin in the woods setting, Evil Dead 2 sort of has the license to do something different and get away with it. But with Army of Darkness, this is the first time we've been in this setting, so I kind of feel like it's wasting this whole scenario a little bit by not starting off with a properly serious horror film. We're just jumping straight into a comedic thing, and it's just a film that troubles me, really. I still find it entertaining. I particularly like the moment with the 3 books. That was a clever scene, but a lot of the other stuff, especially the more slapstick stuff, like when there's like multiple Bruce Campbells, just doesn't do an awful lot for me. I think if I was watching the Evil Dead TV show, I would appreciate comedy much more in that, because over the course of like a 20 episode season or whatever, then a bit of comedy here and there to break it up would probably go down quite well. But when it comes to a 90-minute movie and it's horror, generally I just want a horror movie. So Army of Darkness is a film that I'd probably only watch with other people now. You know, have a couple of beers, have a good laugh with it, but it's not one that I would put on my own anymore. And the continuity's crap as well. I'm sure there's a few things at the start of this that just don't match up with what we've seen in Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 was even worse on that score, to be fair. But yeah, dodgy continuity, dodgy comedy. It's a very averagey film at best, this one. I bet you thought I was going to put Evil Dead 2 next, didn't you? No, I've got Evil Dead Rise at number 4. This is a film which actually could still rise further yet in the future. I think once I've got the Blu-ray and I've studied the film a second time, it could yet take another little jump. But for now, I'm only willing to put it above Army of Darkness. I did enjoy the film. Nothing in it blew me away. And nothing pissed me off about it either. It was a film that just had a nice consistent level throughout most of it, and then it ended, but there was way more about the 2013 film that I loved compared to this one. I actually fell asleep for a couple of minutes during this film, and that's not a reflection on the movie. I saw it on a Friday night, and I'd had a really long week of work, and when it got to the film I was a little bit tired, and it was only a couple of minutes that I nodded off. I think it was just before the finale, because I have no recollection actually right now of how the characters get from the apartment down to the parking garage. So I'm thinking that little part, however long that lasted, was probably the bit that I nodded off, but never mind. I liked the beginning, the prologue in the woods and how that ties into the ending. And I guess everybody who becomes a Deadite in this makes a very good job of it. But none of the gore was really that impressive for me. It was just kind of functional. The bit of gore that I remember the most is a cheese grater going down somebody's leg, and I don't think that's a particularly good sign. But you know what? Like I said, I'm going to watch the film a second time, and we'll see how it does for me on that second viewing. But for now, it is only down here at number 4. So in the middle position, I have Evil Dead 2. For many people, the best film in this series. It has my favourite artwork of all the home releases that I've got. I'll say that. I really like this, although there has been a more recent 4K that they've brought out, which I would like to get hold of eventually. Despite what I said earlier about the comedy of Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2, that's not the main reason why this film has not come higher today. The biggest thing by far that pisses me off about Evil Dead 2 is the terrible continuity. This film does not mesh with the original film. There's this really horrible flashback at the start, which just isn't the movie we've already watched. Now, I get that there were probably legal reasons why they had to suddenly pretend that a lot of the characters from the first film were not actually in that film, but it's still painful to watch, and it seems to go on for quite a long time. This is not actually the longest film you'll ever see. It's only 82 minutes anyway. I'm sure like the first 10 minutes of this are taken up by false flashbacks, which is just really weird. This is one of the slowest films to get going I've ever seen. But once it does get going, it's really cool. The comedy is actually better in this, I think, than Army of Darkness. There's lots of neat ideas, like with the hand thing, and there's like a bloated deadite woman at one point, which is pretty cool. And the big final battle with like the giant tree thing is pretty awesome, actually. So this film does have at least an hour of brilliance in it. Once you get to that point, I can see why it's a beloved movie, but I think it's definitely a bit overrated. I think over the years it's become a bit overblown as to how good Evil Dead 2 supposedly is. It's very rough around the edges. It's a very good watch, but for me it's nowhere near being the best of these. So at number 2, I have the 2013 Evil Dead film, and you probably noticed that I am now in a different t-shirt. Okay, the truth is, this film is so scary. I literally had to go away for 24 hours just to compose myself enough so that I could get on and talk about this one. No, that's all bullshit. The real thing that happened here is that my life is just so hectic. Sometimes I can't even shoot a 10-minute video without having to break it up into 2 days of filming. But anyway, this film absolutely blew me away when I first saw it. The gore in it is just absolutely incredible. I get that they were doing a lot of CGI stuff by this point, but it looks so good, especially the ending in the front yard. I mean, the stuff with the chainsaw in the hand and all the blood flying everywhere. It made me just want to jump up and shout, "This is why I love horror. This is friggin' amazing. This is just ace." And I like the subplot in this to do with the drugs. It just gives the film an interesting viewpoint. I almost found myself at the end of this wondering whether everything you see in this film actually happened or whether it's just in the mind of the main protagonist. It's interesting. I don't think you get stuff like that in Evil Dead Rise. The new one that's just come out, it's basically what you see is what you get, which is fine, but the 2013 film for me is just better. Plus, I didn't say it earlier, but the apartment in Evil Dead Rise, it just doesn't match up to the traditional cabin in the woods setting for me. And if you're going to do an inner city film, I would have liked to have seen more of a Cabrini Green from Candyman type thing, you know, a really edgy and dangerous kind of block of apartments where the locals are just as big of a threat as the demons. You don't really get that in Evil Dead Rise. It's a really posh, fancy looking place actually that they've got. But anyway, we've already talked about that film. Evil Dead 2013, this series is lucky to have a film like this in it. It's just absolutely fantastic for me. And it could have been number 1 today. It could have been. I don't consider it to be a reboot, by the way. For me, it is a sequel. I like the idea that there could be different books of the dead in different cabins here, there and everywhere all across America. That's quite a creepy notion for me. They even say in Evil Dead Rise that there are 3 books of the dead. So I guess we've actually had all 3 now, because I guess one book would cover the Ash films and then the second book would be in this 2013 film, and then you've got the 3rd book in Evil Dead Rise. I don't know how they're going to write their way out of that one if they do another Evil Dead film, which is quite separate from Evil Dead Rise, but I guess that's for another day. But anyway, we've got one more film left to talk about. It was very, very close between Evil Dead Rise and this next one. So let's now find out what is my favourite Evil Dead movie. Yep, in first place, I have the original Evil Dead, and here is my DVD copy of the movie. It's a little bit outdated, this version now. There has been a 4K released in recent times. I do wonder, though, is this the sort of film that needs a 4K? Is that kind of going against the spirit of what this is? Because it feels to me like this is a film which thrives being a kind of gritty, grimy VHS type horror movie, and I'm just not sure how it would play as a really touched up 4K film, but I'll reserve my judgment on that until I have seen the 4K, which I definitely intend to do. But this film just, I mean, it amazed me when I first saw it. I think I saw it on like a Sunday afternoon. I think the rest of my family was out for some reason, and I was just watching it on the couch, and it was almost like a dreamlike experience at the time. It was really weird, but God, I love this film. I've already done a full review on the channel for it. I love how it just dives straight into the action in this. Like the characters, we see them driving up to the cabin, but they're almost there right at the start of the movie. And we get that scare with the camera going through the woods just for good measure. There's no scenes back at the city where somebody's on the phone. Like, oh yeah, that trip to the cabin this weekend, totally on for that. You know, no, we're straight into it. And even when the characters get to the cabin, there's no waking up the next morning and going for a walk in the woods and loads of teen drama, and then they come back to the cabin, and then it's the second night where the action starts. Although that kind of slow build-up can work for some horror movies, I guess, but not in this film. We're straight into it. It feels like barely 10 minutes into this, the shit has already hit the fan, and we're really, really enjoying it and into it. Practical effects go without saying with this, just absolutely superb. Although whenever I think of the effects in Evil Dead 1 now, I just instantly think of mushy peas, but the work that Sam Raimi and it's just amazing. With such a limited budget, you know, the camera angles as well, the camera movements in this film, like the one where the camera goes around the side of the house and checks in on all the windows, and every time the camera's just going through the trees, there's just an energy, and the way that it looks, I don't get how somebody can come along with so little film experience and such little money and just make a film that looks and feels like this even today, even after you've seen it 5 or 6 times already. It's fantastic. So not everybody thinks the original Evil Dead is the best in this series, but I'm very much an OG man. I think this is an absolute work of art. It's a masterpiece movie for me. 5 out of 5 all day long. And yeah, it is my favourite Evil Dead movie. So thank you for listening to me ramble on about this franchise. Do let me know how you would rank the Evil Dead movies in the comments below. And until next time, I will say cheerio, bye-bye.